everyone. Welcome to a myFootpath interview in our series of working with experts in higher education to learn about areas where they've presented, where they've got significant experience. And this is brought to you by myFootpath, the leading firm to bring back and re-enroll stop-out students. The topic today is based upon an acro session they presented recently in Columbus, Ohio, and it was titled "Too Quiet or Too Loud: A Candid Discussion About Leadership Style in a Cultural Context." And each of these three, we've got Rock Hall from Ithaca College, Chris Huang from Purdue University, Fort Wayne, and Michelle Weller from New York Law School, will bring very unique perspectives based upon their background and where they currently are. Each of the three of them also hold leadership positions in ACRO and have been very, very engaged with the organization for quite some time. So we're excited to bring the three of them together. What I'll do briefly is just ask each of you to just provide a kind of snapshot of what you're doing now and what you've done, and then we'll get into some questions. We'll start with you, Rock.
Thanks a lot, Luke. My name is Rock Hall. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Ithaca College. I've been in the higher ed space north of 30 years, and I've had the privilege of working for 6 different institutions. I think within that time, primarily, my focus has been building student populations. And I've always given this intro within my role with respect to what I do. I try to qualify, quantify, and diversify a campus every year with a cohort of forward-leaning and ambitious young people. So with that, I'll happily pass it to Michelle.
Hello, my name is Michelle Sigaridas-Weller. I'm the Assistant Dean of Academic Operations and Registrar at New York Law School. I've worked in higher ed for about 15 years. Oh, wow, almost 20 years now, but let's not get into numbers. My previous positions before Registrar's Office were in student life, and the transition from student services to academic services showed me a different way of working with students and with faculty, and I'm looking forward to chatting more about my experiences.
I'm Chris Huang. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor and Registrar at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. I've been here since May of 22. I've been a registrar since 06, and my first bit in higher education was actually an admissions counselor. Did that for about 3 years. And I also serve on the ACRO board as Vice President for Information Technology. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic, thanks. Well, when you kicked off your session, you took a poll of the participants and asked them, describe a word that's aligned with leadership. And the top 4 in this order were supportive, coach, confident, and visionary. So more people chose those words than other words. There were a lot of other words. But Chris, could you speak a little bit maybe about how you've seen the importance of any one of those 4, supportive, coach, confident, and visionary, in your career, and how you might be able to support those who work with you and need to develop those skills?
Sure. Confidence, I think, is one that strikes me because part of the session, as a person who's more introverted, who's more of an analytical type person, who's more reserved than maybe someone compared to Rock, who's more outgoing and so forth, and maybe what people might consider leadership material. Some of the things that kind of helped inspire the session was about kind of why there aren't as many Asians in the C-suite. It's an article from the Harvard Business Review. And so that kind of got me thinking about, hey, what do we think about when we think about leadership? And while confidence can play a role of it, sometimes I think a quiet confidence, maybe from an Asian American perspective, maybe isn't always as valued compared to, people who, when we think of a leader, we think of, maybe like a Martin Luther King Jr. and who's just really inspirational with their words and speech and that sort of thing. That's not my kind of leadership style. There's different forms of leadership, I guess, is kind of where I would be coming from.
Thanks, Chris. Michelle, a similar or different experience?
Well, for myself, similarly, confidence is exuded in different ways and is perceived in different ways. So you can be confident, but present yourself in a way that the other person does not view as confidence. Being quiet in certain situations may not mean the same thing. Also affected by gender expression and racial outer expression can be perceived different ways by different communities. So whenever we think about these words like confidence and support, we can't disconnect that from our assumptions of what that means in different cultural situations.
Great, thanks. Rock, I want to visit a little bit the title, Too Quiet or Too Loud. In your years of experience, I'm pretty certain you've mentored a significant number of people who've gone on to become vice presidents themselves, and that doesn't just come naturally. What would be some insights you could share on how to provide guidance, be it modeling or professional development courses, or in your experience, what's been helpful to help you boost your staff?
Yeah, I think you have to lean into this idea and concept of imperfection. I think, when you think of C-suite leaders, I joke that we age in dog years. And, it's no surprise that this is my 6th college campus, and hopefully my last one for a while. And so I think, within that, you become better at understanding data, you become better at understanding the landscape, identifying gaps. But I think the most important piece of what we do, you become better at the human condition. It always boils down to people. And I think this ability to listen, this ability to engage in a meaningful way is really important. So this idea of leaning into imperfection has to come into the planning process. I think, with C-suite leaders, there's this fallacy that we kind of land and we know it all. We kind of, in the DISC survey, I am an I, action-oriented, results-oriented. And so it's this perception that we kind of land, know it all, and give direction. I think the best leaders have the ability to listen and draw on people's strengths, and then maybe when they're comfortable, push them out. Within any team dynamic, the most difficult thing to change is someone's mind. And I think, you have to understand both sides of that coin. You have gals and guys like me who float around every 5 to 7 to 10 years. They land at a different team, kind of like the Mandalorian. You're in this tribe of people who need your help, and you're trying to understand and get things going, But on the flip side of that, a bit more seriously, you have teams of people who have seen leadership come and go. They've seen leadership styles change. And so I think one of my best approaches when I land, I try to be extremely cool and extremely curious. I don't try to give directives or push people around, but tell me what broke, why it broke, and what do you think will fix it? And then we try to mentor towards the middle. I think that type of framing helps leaders develop grace within their stance, to understand that things will not be right maybe the first time, but hopefully the second time. And then from there, I think they can find their voice. There's no surprise you're talking to 3 people of color here. And Chris had a great perspective as an Asian C-suite leader, Michelle as a woman of color C-suite leader. And even within my identity, it is that delicate line I have to walk as a tall, large, dark-skinned Black man. Within society, people naturally cower or fear you because they're conditioned to do so. And so within my leadership approach and style, I try to be the contrarian. I try to be everything opposite of what they expect. They expect for me to be boisterous, loud, to hit desks, to scream, to break things. Not at all. I think as a person of color within the C-suite space, and I've said this before, and I'll digress after this, we really have to be Jedi. I joked about the Mandalorian effect earlier, but as a person of color within C-suite leadership, you really have to comport your emotions on a daily basis by the minute. And you really have to, again, almost be a Jedi and take no offense to anything done or said against you, but still be effective and fight the good fight with the same level of vigor and enthusiasm. So that's not a tall order. Yeah. and it's great to see the team back together again. Chris and Michelle, great to see you guys, man.
Likewise. I was going to add a little bit on what Rock was saying from the Asian American perspective. I mean, I would go with the leadership quote of what got you here won't get you there, right? So the perception that of Asian Americans is like we're hardworking, we're quiet, and we get the job done. But why we're not into the C-suite level as much is because we're not assertive enough or we're not vocal enough. So it's that fine perception of, hey, it's like, hey, we're quote unquote the model minority myth that sometimes gets placed on Asian Americans because we are quiet, we're hard workers and so forth. Not saying others aren't, but just that's kind of the label that's associated. So then they don't think of us as leadership material. But some of the things as it relates to, what's the role of a leader? One big thing is support, right? Supporting the work and supporting the people who do the work, not necessarily always doing the work. And so I think sometimes we have to figure out or a change in terms of the quote unquote the playbook and leveraging what got us here won't necessarily make us successful when we are placed in those leadership roles. I try to lead by example. I'm the second Asian American vice president on ACRO board. I've tried to do what I can to share my story or share my strategies with others within the AAPI caucus, and just others in general, just people of color in general, because we have similar experiences, I think, that we can all point to in regards to our experiences in a still predominantly white society or people who are in those seats tend to hire people who look like themselves. So when people do quote unquote crack and make it into that level, I feel like we have a sense of responsibility to be able to say, hey, let me bring other people along with, and how can we help you be successful in that role too?
Great, thanks, Chris. Michelle, one of the topics aligned with your presentation as a group had to be with speaking up or being quiet, and that both of those send messages. In your experience, how have you kind of juggled when you're in a leadership meeting or a situation and you've got other folk around you who may be peers, they may be part of your team, but they're taking messages from how you're going to speak up or not say something. How do you kind of make that all happen quickly?
Trust is the foundation of everything that we do in the registrar's office. If the students don't trust that we are stewards of their student information, why are we even there for them? If your teammates don't trust that you're doing your best to advocate for them, why are we even in the same building together? At the same time, if you're going to speak up on behalf of somebody else, you must have innately some sense of trust in that room, that what they're going to do with the information you give to them, that it's a safe space, that they're taking your word for your expertise, that they believe what you say. And this goes across any situation. When you're presenting yourself to someone, do you trust that they're going to believe what you're saying and that they're going to take it and actually do something with that information? So, and if I'm brand new to a certain space, like for example, spring of 2020 was the first time that I started attending more and more of the upper level senior staff meetings. I didn't before that, but I had an area of expertise that I brought to that room. So I had something to say. They believed what I had to say because it came from a place of expertise. If I came to that room with nothing of substance, it would have been a different type of conversation. And I have seen certain rooms where people come into the room and they have the confidence, but not the substance. And that makes a very big difference in how they are perceived and how they progress in the future.
Thanks for that observation. Rock, you've been going to board meetings for some time, and that's a dynamic where we've got a bunch of seriously important stakeholders who are primarily not experts in the operations of an institution, and I'm certain you have presented some what may seem to some board members wild and crazy ideas or deviations from ways things have gone before. How have you found your way to try to convey messages that are going to instill some trust in maybe significant new directions that you might be trying to take the institution in?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to one of the words on that list, and I'm going to adopt coaching. Again, when people hear the term vice president, they think, "Oh, you have all the power." And I lovingly joke, "No, I'm just better at begging than you are." And so I think within that confine, in all seriousness, the best way I can be a good steward to this college and to the president is to coach up. And and you said it. A lot of board members, rarely do they have a true academic background. Rarely did they teach in the classroom. I think the extent of their knowledge, they went to college and they were incredibly successful and they're incredibly smart and kind and they give back. But to that end, I take no offense at false assumption. I take no offense at redundancy. I think coaching is good in any arena. As a kid, I was coached athletically. When I was an younger C-suite leader, I was coached on how to be a leader. And so I think in that vein, you have to coach the board into understanding kind of your stance. Now, at a nut and bolts level, you have to lead with data. You can't, and Michelle said it beautifully, it works until it doesn't. You can have all the bravado, all the bluster, all the enthusiasm in the world, but if you're just kind of shooting things out and spinning in circles, people will lose interest in you very quickly. You have to lead with data, you have to lead with substance, but to a certain degree as well, I think you do have to have almost an optimism and a coaching spirit. Whenever someone brings you into a new team, chances are things aren't going right. Either someone left in haste, they left for a better position, or for whatever reason, you just have to think of a new strategy and direction. And again, I mentioned earlier, you might be that new person who inherits a team who's been there for a while. So you really have to listen dispassionately and meet in the middle. And so I think with the board, that's another great piece of it too. I've really trained the way I hear and the way I process information in real time. Again, the word that I use is dispassionate. You almost have to be dispassionate in thought, dispassionate in character, because, the board, they have to get it right. And they're going to ask you questions 50 different times from 80 different angles. And you have to explain something you might have explained before. And that's okay because coaches do that, they'll explain a play, a step, a dance move 100 times because their hope is that you get it. And you understand too, that there are a lot of things beyond your control. Deposits are down, discount rate is up. Going back to the coaching analogy, that's like saying, well, coach, it's raining. And my response is, it's raining on everyone. We still have to play. And so this idea of adopting a coaching stand with the board, I think they appreciate it. I think the tone, the optimism is there. And again, on the flip side of the coin, it's tough. You have to show them that you can listen dispassionately and not take offense to procedure and policy that's meant to make things better, even when it's tied to some of your actions or decisions. So it's taken me a while to get to that stance. I was very lucky when I was executive director at the University of Utah, the culture there, they had executive coaches for their C-suite leaders. At the time, being a first generation student and a graduate walking into C-suite leadership, I initially saw it as maybe something wrong. Is there something wrong with me that I need a coach? But, the way they explained it, like I just did, you have a coach when you played sports, you're a C-suite leader talking to boards, presidents, media, political constituents. So I was lucky at Utah. They coached me to talk and deal with those people on a very large level. And then I had the ability to practice it at Arcadia. And now at Ithaca, I think I could master it.
That's great. Chris, you had in the slide presentation, one of them that showed 4 different Myers-Briggs personality types. And it was titled something along the lines of, harnessing your strengths and using them or recognizing them. Can you speak a little bit about assessing yourself, self-awareness, and how you might be able to, as you alluded earlier, use those skills that you've got to further your mission?
Sure. Well, I look at the approach of, in terms of leadership, is not you're ever arrived. At least for me, it's like continuous improvement. How do I keep getting better as a leader, as a father, as a husband, as an employee? So I think leadership development start with self, right? Like when you're flying the airplane, they say before you put the mask on, someone else, put it on yourself first. So for me, I put up that slide of my personality type, which is ISFJ, introvert, sensing, feeler, um, judging, which again are probably not always the qualities that people might think of as a leader. And I think in terms of leadership nowadays, with so much that we have to be attentive to, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, we need people who understand not just the numbers and getting us from here to there. We also need to help people understand the journey, the soft stuff, in terms of creating a sense of belonging on a team. How do people feel connected? Do they feel like the work that they do is valuable? Um, and so like what Rock had said earlier too, like not knowing, not reacting, being calm, cool, collected is kind of what I say in a meeting, because yeah, there could be things that upset me based on what I hear or decision that's made or was made without my input or not me knowing, that sort of thing. Um, but how do you deal with it? But also just like what Rock said too, we're not perfect people. So admitting, hey, I messed up on this. I made an assumption here, or I was wrong about this. Apologize where we can, and how can we continue to get better? So yeah, emotional intelligence plays a big role, I think, in terms of leadership and also connecting with the team. So you're not just the Wizard of Oz behind this curtain, and people are just scared of you and being approachable. I mean, some of the comments I get from my deans is like, "Are you going to pick up the phone when I call?" And yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I? I would have no reason not to do that, right? I mean, just simple things that I think go a long way in terms of building rapport, building camaraderie, and just continuous improvement is kind of what I look at it, because it's all around us too, right? With systems that we have to implement, or new releases that we have to now test in our systems and so forth before we put them into production, that are supposed to move us towards continuous improvement.
Right. Awesome. Michelle, would you get behind that assessment tool, or have you gotten behind some other ones that you found valuable? What have been some good ways to recognize your own strengths or strengths of your team?
Well, there you go. Strengths Finder. That's one of my favorites. I shy away from personality or anything with the word personality in there. But I would caution anybody that any type of assessment is a point in time assessment of who you are or who you think you are, because it's self-reported to yourself. I think if somebody else was to report on you, they may choose some other factors. If you had a coach, they would show you that perhaps you were in one range and then moved to another range. So Rock, and you were saying you had your executive coach. Imagine who they saw you then and who you are now is likely a very different person. Uh, there you go. Um, so as we discussed in our session, um, it's not any one of these assessments is a tool to help you develop, like Chris said, to get you somewhere further. And when used in a team setting, helps you to see how you can best interact with each other. Perhaps there's some things that are very clear about you that hasn't changed since high school. A lot of the development happens in the adolescent to the 20s, the time when your college students are at your institution. A lot of that is developed and kind of set in stone there. But as you're developing as a leader and you're coming in brand new to a new institution, I almost feel like every new person, that's their freshman year at their institution, and they're going to be a brand new person and have a chance to be a whole new personality type there.
Thanks.
If I could add real quick,
Please.
Luke, I think assessments is definitely a way to kind of have a common experience as well that you can refer back to as a team. And I think one of the things of leadership is helping people understand how you're wired, how they can work with you. So everything's a two-way street. It's not so much this is my way or the highway. It's really more this is how I show up sometimes and how I can show up based upon my personality type or my strengths, and so forth. But this is how you can also work with me, or these are the things that are important to me. So just wanted to share that as well.
Super. I'll bring in our last question, ask each of the three of you to comment on it. And one of your final slides was, how do you advocate for others to make the right decision? And I think the premise is the right decision for them because they are likely the expert in the field, and it needs to be something that people are true to themselves about. Rock, you post your musings on LinkedIn on a near daily basis, and a lot of them are good pick me ups. I enjoy them, and some of them you put out topics that are perplexing. I wouldn't say controversial, but I'd say make someone, sit back and listen and replay it and say, maybe I should look at that in a different way. And you haven't been shy about that. How do you decide what some of those positions are that you get behind when you get behind them?
I think that's a great question. And I think it boils down to this idea of agency. And earlier I talked about coaching. Essentially, coaching helps people build agency. And with that, Chris had a great point, about how you develop, the skill sets, hard and soft. I've evolved that a little bit to hard and sharp. I think if you have the ability to communicate, if you have the ability to influence people and galvanize them towards action, if you have the ability to walk into an unfamiliar space and create a sense of community, that's a very sharp skill. There's nothing soft about that. And so this idea of hard skills and sharp skills align to help you create agency. And I think that's how you help people move forward. In relations to the musings, you're right. I have a history in broadcast journalism. As a kid, I did stand-up comedy in college to help put some bread on the table. And so this idea of trying to be brief but inspirational, I try to land jokingly and lovingly between Mr. Rogers and Mr. T. And that's kind of, the lines that I color in. And you're right, never too controversial. There's enough of that out there. I don't think I have to live in that space. But I do try to be brief. I try to be inspirational. I try to be informative. I try to be, thought-provoking to a certain degree. But at the end of it, it's to help people identify agency. I think once you have agency, once you know who you are, once you know your voice, you can walk into any room under the sun and find your tribe, find fit, and most importantly, add, heft, and contribute. So with that, I'll pass the baton.
Thanks, Michelle.
When you're advocating for others, it's best to put that other person first. Don't make that other person into a protege of yourself. Their correct answer is not your correct answer, and it shouldn't be. That's also the benefit of having multiple people in a room making decisions. Maybe even the core tenet of diversity in any institution, regardless of the background. I want you to think about the assumption that everyone has a correct answer. Just because even in this session right here, I'm telling you right now, I'm making myself vulnerable by telling you, I don't have all the right answers. And sometimes people viewing these types of sessions think, oh, great, a group of leaders that can solve the problem of how to be the best leader out there. Maybe we need to step back and think more about, we are all people working together. If we all had the right answers, perhaps we would be computer programs that would just spit out the correct answers. But the reality is you're working with a bunch of people who all have their own issues, their own life, whatever burden they're carrying on their backs. And we're just doing our best to make what I trust to be a successful institution. I believe that everyone on this call wants me to succeed on this call. They want their own institutions to look good in front of whoever's watching this session right now. But we don't all have the answers. We're doing our best with what we've got. And in answer to how do I advocate for that next person, if I can make that person feel safe, if that means I have to be the vulnerable person for them to be safe, I will take that role. If that means they need me to be the strong person, I will lift them up and bring them to the next level. But it's that interaction between the people that you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to see, where is that person? Where do they want to go? And keep moving forward with them.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I echo kind of what Michelle's already said about keeping the interest of the person that you're advocating for in mind, because it's not always about us, right? I mean, myself, right? It's we over me. And so having a servant leader mentality, maybe, and how can we serve? How can we help? In terms of advocating, I guess, as I mentioned, I'm just the second Asian American board member on ACRO's board. The last one served in 1992, and I not that I'm a voice, but I guess I try to advocate through leading by example that, hey, there's opportunities for people. And then I think encouraging people along the way. I'm very grateful for Rock and Michelle to go and join me on the leadership on the annual meeting on this leadership topic. I think creating opportunities for that is a way to advocate. Um, Advocate is also kind of educate. Sometimes I think there's similarities there. Even just on the on the ACRO board, letting people know like there's people in higher education probably are familiar with HBCUs, HSIs, but I had shared, there's a institutional code called ANAPESIS, which is for Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institutions. Very, very little is known about that, and how do we just even raising it there was as I think as a form of advocacy. So I think it's just being true to who you are, the issues that concern you, using the platform to be able to speak maybe and give voice or give an opportunity for people who might not be able to be in that room or be in that space. Yeah, I think it just kind of comes not naturally per se, but just comes with the territory in terms of leadership.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank our panel, Rock Hall from Ithaca College, Michelle Weller at New York Law School, Chris Huang from Purdue University, Fort Wayne, for sharing with us again what you were able to share with a smaller group, although it was up the packed room, but this is going out nationally. To be able to share your views on leadership, too quiet or too loud, a candid discussion about leadership style and cultural context. I know each of the three of them would welcome emails from anyone individually who wanted to discuss the matter further or get a little advice on how to elevate your teams or yourselves. And they're three great people just to top it off. So brought to you again by myFootpath. We hope this has been of great value to everyone, and thank you for watching.